Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We have KamalaDevi here talking about her book, Sex Shamans, True Stories of Sacred Sexuality and Awakening. KamalaDevi McClure is was featured in the Showtime's docuseries Polyamory, Married. I will figure this out to pronounce it correctly. Married and Dating, and appeared in the award-winning documentary Sex Magic, and is the author of this lovely book. So welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, I wanted to talk about some of the things that we mentioned in the first segment, and I know that you're trying to. Is it sexual evolution or revolution that your vision is?
So the the video cut out just a tiny bit. So the question was,
Sexual evolution or revolution? What is it that you want? What's your vision for this body of work?
yeah, beyond this body of work, there is a movement happening where people are waking up to the power of their, it's not just their own sexuality, but that sexuality is uh, every part of life, that it is the life force energy. And when this awakens in people, there's no longer a need to, you know, people please or tiptoe around or be, present yourself in a certain way to get approval. It's more like, hey, I recognize that I have the God force running through me. I am love. What do I do with that? How do I wield that responsibly? And so it's different than just a conscious awakening. There's this whole amazing yoga movement that's brought people into higher states of consciousness, which I'm so grateful for. But how to bring that down into the body, into the fullness of everything that we create. And what comes with that is a lot of, first responsibility about how we wield that. But also it's a like inherent creativity and the gift of being able to offer our unique contribution in the world, because it really ignites a kind of a purpose. And so the book is a collection of different stories and practices to support people on their own awakening journey.
Mm.
And I believe these are conversations that aren't happening. Like they're happening in small circles and have been through my mystery school around the world. But the book allows us to get it out to people who wouldn't normally travel with us to Guatemala or India or, the various sacred sites where we do these rituals.
So my own personal experience with this is that I've been doing this non-dual tantric practice, and my energy was like this, like a cone. And it got to the point where, and I was walking on the ground. I did the Camino, which is a 500-mile path. And so when you're in nature all the time, you have a ton of earth energy that is coming up. And it was almost like I was like two triangles balanced on one on top of each other. One that was like, opening up like this, because I'd already been pretty open this direction. But in a cone this way, of which there was like some choking point that, it actually, I literally felt like I was like on fire. Like I had all this life energy and this creativity and sexuality. And I was like, I feel like I'm going crazy because it was not embodied. I think that's what you're talking about. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
it's gorgeous because nature is the container for it. So
Hmm.
for you to have that experience in Spain, and also to have it, you're describing it like a conical experience, which, a lot of times in book, and this is the challenge of writing, about things on three-dimensional plane, is that the descending path looks like a triangle, or the second half of the Star of David.
Hmm.
Um, but when you talk about it in a cone, it is actually not just three-dimensional. It's like five-dimensional. It's very much an embodied experience. I
Right.
love hearing you describe it. The challenge is where you say, I feel out of body. And that's okay, because the greater non-physical part of us is much bigger than this body. What we're awakening, though, is what we now know in quantum physics that within the cells there's immense amounts of space, and how to inhabit the space inside the body so that the soul doesn't have to leave the body, can just fill and vibrate, this vessel with life force.
Yeah, and so for what I had was this unbalance. It wasn't, I would love to believe that it's this beautiful, Star of David kind of like, thing.
Right.
It was
Right.
more like, it was more like this on my head, and it was more like two triangles. And I think that this is, in fact, some of the problems that you have with a lot of yoga practices, right? It's like it was this two
Uh-huh.
triangles on top of each other,
Right.
because I had so much energy going up and so much energy going down. And I think because I was going up and out versus being embodied, it felt very disorienting. And so I think that's what, and I don't know why, because it could be some of the things that you're talking about. You said that we all have sexual wounds that need healing: shame, guilt, fear, and sexual trauma. How, is that why? Is that the parts that, how are those things related to this
Sure.
discussion?
So sometimes, when you're describing, hey, the energy, we are these channels, and the energy might not have gone directly through your pranic tube. It might have hit a block. And
Yes.
I'm using that as an example for you, but you're speaking for the collective. We all
Mm-hmm.
have blocks. We all have
Mm-hmm.
wounds. We all have like fractures in our energy. And sometimes that block is right in the center, like where the diaphragmatic, there's a split right across the half of the body here with
Yeah.
this. And sometimes it's there. Other times it's in the anus. Other times it's in the third eye. I mean, the block can be different
Mm.
places, but depending on
Mm.
your programming, not just what you've been taught by Mother, Father, Church, and State, but also your own experiences or your self concepts. And so a big part of the shamanic path requires community, because as much as we can go and do this work inside, or we can do it by reading a book, when we vibrate with other beings, there's a transmission, and there's an information, and there's an exchange. And this is
Mm.
why we can do powerful work alone, but partnered exercises can open, where two or more are gathered, there I am, can really open some of these blocks. So it might take a sex shaman or a healer or an intuitive to feel and support you, identifying where those blocks are and helping you move them. Because sometimes my own, which by the way, obviously I just want to disclaim, I have my own blind spots. I have my own
Right.
wounding shadow, and I need my tribe to point it out to me, or to hold me lovingly, supporting me through it.
Yeah, and that's what the Camino is. You're walking in community with hundreds, thousands. There was literally 1,000 people walking at the same time that I'm walking. So there's a collective energy of
What year
wounding.
did you do it?
I just did it in September of last year.
Sweet. So you might have been there around the same time as my husband and son.
Oh
Um,
wow.
my son is at that rite of passage phase where he's transitioning to being a young man. And one of our deep, I guess it's in our cosmology, one of the
Hmm.
problems with society is that we've lost our rite of passage
For
ceremonies.
sure.
And so my husband took my son to walk the Camino as one of, he's in a series of rituals to
Beautiful.
fortify him. But what happens in a culture, if you as a listener, reflect back on what was your rite of passage, how did your parents receive you coming into your womanhood or your manhood, and you recognize that, whoa, that was I really empowered, equipped? Was it reflected back to me that I was truly a mature adult who has the capacity to bring life into the world? And if it wasn't, if you didn't really get that reflection and into your cells, then you maybe have a perpetual state of infancy, like
Hmm.
this immaturity about with which you're selecting your partners, or in which you go through in your lovemaking, or just in your self-concept about who you are as a man or a woman or other on the planet. And so big part of this work as a sex shaman is to reclaim and re-adult and and to mature, from the wounded into the awakened from the
Hmm.
inside out.
My own personal experience on the Camino was I was actually an empty nester. So my youngest son went to college, and I thought I'm just going to walk because I know this is going to shatter my heart in a thousand pieces. And also, when they were born, I was not very conscious at all about anything, and so I embarked on this beautiful journey of parenthood, very, very unconscious. So I wanted to then embark on the newest part of cronehood, right, in a very different way to be conscious. And what was interesting is as I was walking, it was almost like I was reliving all the parts of my life. From in the very beginning, I was hanging out with these people who were way younger, like 20, 30 years old, and they were drinking and, like cavorting around. And I did that too. And I had lost that aspect of myself as I became a mother, like that fun kind of like, woohoo, let's go out and party. Like I lost all of it. And then some of it I was like, I'm actually glad I lost this. And some of it was like, wow, I lost like some vital aspect of myself. And then also, like, it's interesting because when you become my age, it's like 57 right now, you lose your sense of vitality. I mean, I felt like I was like a dry, withered old leaf. And when I was walking, it was interesting because I'd see other women who kind of have that same vibe. But being around these young people who they didn't think about my age, they were just looking at the life energy. And it was like people who were like 25 hitting on me. It was a bizarre scenario. I can't even tell you how weird it was, but it was the kind of healing that you're talking about in community that was happening to like help revision myself from not this like withered old leaf, but someone who could choose to have vital life energy and have it to be magnetic to people who I wouldn't have even thought would be, magnetized by that.
Yeah, and you're pointing to that concept of even that desire is holy, right?
Hmm.
So the attraction that you got from others, or even just your own preference and aversion as you judged the stages of life that they're in, like that process of noticing, wow, the life force energy, like youth, whether it's youth or age, or it's this, you use the word magnetism. It's like we magnetize oftentimes the medicine that we need to be whole.
Mm.
So when we're feeling, like, oh, empty nester, and I'm missing out on, there's ingredients that I've left behind, and some that I need to leave behind.
Hmm.
But so your share implies the very like process of, um, how the universe is really like a tarot reading. It's
Hmm.
like you go on a extraordinary journey, whether it's a walk in the Camino or whether you're doing any of the practices in this book, you're doing something extraordinary. And that means it, out of the mundane, out of the ordinary. And when you're in that field, the universe will give you exactly what you need in
Right.
order to see yourself, in order to heal yourself. And we have to tune in to our attractions, our aversions, our dreams, our insights, our intuition in order to really open um, to that communion.
Yeah, and I think that it was healing, and I think there was all the things that you mentioned, the shame around like, wow, it's nice to actually have like a 20-year-old be hitting on like 26-year-old hitting. I mean, it's bizarre and I'm confused, but like, wow, like you don't have that happen anymore, especially in Europe. There's a very different notion of age. Like people don't look at age as much as they do in the US. And then the guilt because I'm happily married, so I felt all of that. Like, how am I supposed to have sexual feelings and like be married? Like, it feels even guilty to have these sexual impulses. And then the the and then I do think that what it did subsequent to returning home and when I've becoming realizing that I have to be more embodied, the fear and trauma associated with probably ancestral wounds and previous lifetimes in which I've had a lot of sexual trauma. And so I've just been kind of going through. So it did echo back all of the things that I needed for healing. So it was a beautiful thing. I mean, nature is, and I assume that's what happens when people have sexual healing, that there's all those things will become revealed just through the act of lovemaking. I think that's what I'm hearing you say. Is that right?
It, yes, and it's not just through the act of lovemaking, because it has a lot to do with our solo practice. It's like, and the intention that we bring to the lovemaking and the setting, the nature piece that you're pointing to is a lot of the shamanic work that we do is on the land and listening to the land and calling on our guides. And nature has a way of like composting and recycling. So whatever these wounds are and these stories are and these cultural limitations, we can kind of give that back to the earth, turn it into fertilizer, and then regrow ourselves.
Beautiful. So in fact, and I felt like that because it was very, I'm like, this is healing, but not like I'm sitting down with a therapist and they're listening to all of my, I had this happen and that, it was more like nature. It was just like generating the healing just by walking on the earth. It was healing. And so it's just a beautiful thing. So we've been talking to KamalaDevi about her book, Sex Shamans. Specifically, we've been talking about the shame, guilt, fear, and sexual trauma, and how life energy itself is healing for all of those things, and how the processes in this book can actually come to not only a closer connection between to your spirit and spiritual awakening, but also for your healing, which is all part of the whole process. So thank you so much for being here.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.